Hey, what's up everybody? Marcus Philly here from Functional Bodybuilding, and today I'm going to be breaking down the Cossack Squat, a movement that I love to use in my own training and in many of my programs. Check it out. Squatting is regarded as the king of lower body training. But a lot of people neglect single leg squatting and a single leg training, and they're leaving tons of mobility and strength gains on the table. Additionally, when you only train bilateral exercises, over time you are going to develop imbalances. These imbalances that maybe started due to an injury, the sport you played, or how you carried yourself in life will start to get exacerbated by those double leg or bilateral movements. Our upper body and our lower body, our core for that matter, definitely need unilateral training. Protect yourself against injury, against strength plateaus. You might find that by adding in more unilateral training, you are going to see dramatic strength gains even inside of your bilateral squatting exercises. So today I'm going to show you how to tackle one of my favorite unilateral exercises for the lower body, and that is the Cossack Squat. So first off, let's ask ourselves, what is a Cossack Squat? Well, the Cossack Squat is a single leg squatting variation that requires a tremendous amount of coordination, mobility, flexibility, and strength. Much like the split squat or the lunge, the Cossack Squat sends one side of the body into a full bottom position of a squat, while it lengthens and stretches the other side of the body. Most other squatting protocols actually work sagittal plane, front to back, whether that's back squatting, front squatting, lunges, split squats. What makes the Cossack Squat one of the most unique exercises in the training protocol is that it's a frontal plane exercise, meaning you're moving side to side, which is great for athletics, and it's also great for training a group of muscles that does not get trained or addressed in those sagittal plane exercises that are so common in the gym. With functional bodybuilding, I love to find planes of movement and motor patterns that are underrepresented in the gym. So the Cossack Squat is something I love to work on with my athletes because it gives them strength in new ranges and in new directions. The Cossack Squat is terrific for targeting your quads, your hip adductors, your glutes, and your hamstrings. As you progress your skill, you're going to be able to choose loading patterns in the Cossack Squat that are going to place a strong demand on your trunk and your abdominal strength as well. And then even the connective tissue that is around your hips, your ankles, and your knees are going to get a lot of work from this particular movement. The Cossack Squat is super challenging because it requires both strength and mobility. This takes most of our clients close to their end range of motion, where they might feel vulnerable, a little unstable, and even weak. So we need to provide you with a set of regressions or foundational movement patterns that you can focus on to get your base strength in the Cossack Squat so that you can use it effectively in your training. Let's take a look now at the points of performance that we want in the Cossack Squat. As well, let's look at some of the regressions and ways that you can build up to a standard Cossack Squat right now. Let's take a minute to look at what the Cossack Squat looks like when it's done correctly, and I'll tell you about the points of performance that we're going to be trying to hit as you progress through this in your own training. So with the Cossack Squat, I'm going to take a wide stance, and it's going to look like an A frame with my legs. As I move down into one of my single leg Cossack Squats, I'm looking for a few different things. Number one, the heel on both of my feet are staying on the ground. Okay, this is where we want to get to eventually. I'll talk about some variations when that might not be the case, but for now, both heels are down. I'm also in a full squat on this leg. My hip is as low as it's going to go. My ankle is fully flexed, and you can see my knee is out over my toe with my foot flat. That's what we're trying to achieve. This back leg is staying straight, and my torso is upright. I'm not pitched too far forward. Okay, I'll show you on the other side. Come down, hitting those same points of performance. Heels are flat on the ground, leg is straight, torso's upright, and this knee is over the toe with a fully flexed ankle and my hip way down below my knee. Now, as you go through a Cossack squat, there's a couple different subtle variations that can happen as you're trying to develop this position. Number one, if you have very tight adductors, that's the inside of your leg, this can be a very dramatic stretch and it can limit your ability to get down. So I'm okay with the back toe turning up in this way. What that's going to do is it's going to put more of the stretch onto your hamstring as opposed to this position, which is more your adductor. So if I'm in a hamstring stretch position, my body rotates slightly, but as you can see, I'm still maintaining tall torso positioning. Okay, so I'll come back to here and back up to a full rep. I'll shoot a couple more reps. This is with the toe coming up. This is with the toe staying down. Okay, so we're going to look at now how can we regress this all the way back, get you into these positions, because this is a highly demanding mobility drill as well as a strength drill, and you want to have some tools to help get you there. All right, so the first regression that you're going to want to look into using is something that will support your hands to give you a counterbalance and allow you to really achieve good posture and hit full range of motion. We're aiming to build good range of motion in the Cossack squat before we try and intensify it with weight or with putting it into conditioning formats. So the way you want to do that is you can find like even just a door frame in your house, or if you have a squat stand like this, you're going to face it straight on and take that same stance and be sure that you can hold on to this however is going to be supportive and helpful for you. And now you're going to start to go into this deep squat position. Now, one of the challenges is being able to overcome ankle flexibility. So I can lean way back and hold on to this post, and that's going to allow me to find that deep hip stretch, get a big adductor stretch or the hamstring stretch if I let the back toe come up. And what I can practice is pulling myself forward, getting a little bit more ankle stretch into this position, and then I can use that to climb back up. One thing that you could consider is that when you're in a supported position like this, I think it's okay to let this heel come up off the ground. If you let that heel come up off the ground, you'll feel a more dramatic stretch in your ankle, your calf, your soleus, which is something that you're going to want to develop over time anyway. As you come back out of the Cossack squat, drop the heel back to the ground and then use the support of the post to get you back up. So again, it can look like this. I go down, maybe I get a stretch here, let my knee come forward and heel come up, back down and to the top. Now alternatively, if you're in the gym and you have access to a ring or a TRX strap or a rope, this is a really useful way to support yourself through both ranges of motion. It's a little bit more dynamic than the post, but you could step back and you could go through full range of motion, and now you can actually use this ring to pull you up out of your squat. And remember, these are two variations that are extremely useful for developing range of motion, getting the technique and the motor control of this exercise down. So don't be so worried about, well, am I pulling too much or am I using support too much? Use as much support as you need to develop the flexibility and hit the range of motion points of performance standards that I showed you just a moment ago. Okay, so you've just worked on your hand-supported Cossack squat. By holding on to that rig, you're going to be able to get deep ranges of motion and not feel like you're in a vulnerable position, get a good stretch. But now you want to progress to being able to do this with your own body weight, not holding on to something. And the heel elevated or the foot elevated position is going to be a useful tool for you to progress now, because one of the challenges of getting down into a Cossack squat, again, as I've said it a number of times now, is mobility. If I put my foot, my leading foot, my working foot up onto an elevated surface, like this is a 6-inch box, it's going to make the range of motion, it's going to make the load of my body, it's also going to make my ability to get tall in my torso position much easier. So you can start with something like 6 inches, and then as you get stronger, more mobile, progress down to 2 or 3 inches, just like that. Now, once you've done some foot elevated work, another mobility obstacle that people need to overcome is simply just the ankle flexibility. Having a heel lift on your foot that you're working on, in this case, a 1-inch plate, if I place my heel right onto that plate, now I've got a little bit of a lift to my heel that's going to allow me to get more ankle range of motion, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to get down into your position without loading up just the ball of your feet. You can still keep the weight in your heel. So as I showed you before when you were doing hand supported, coming up on the toe is a great way to get some stretch. Now you've got that added support underneath your heel from the weight plate or a book or something, a small step in your home, and that's going to allow you to get into that position by keeping your torso tall and not having that ankle restriction push you backwards and fall backwards onto your bum. Okay, I've given you a perfect regression that allows you to use your own body weight with the support of the squat stand or a door frame or a ring or a TRX strap. Now I'm going to show you a regression that's actually loaded, but I'm using a landmine, and a landmine as a tool for loading is unique. It's anchored at one side. So holding onto a landmine in the Cossack squat will actually provide you a little bit more stability than if you were just doing a weight out in the free space. I like that as a learning progression tool for you in the Cossack squat. So there's two variations that you can do. You can do a goblet position, which might be the easiest. Keep in mind, you can use whatever weight you want on this, and loading is totally optional when you're learning the movement. Take off the weight plate and it's still an effective tool because now I have something to help balance me as I go down through the full range of motion. This counterbalance that I'm holding on to, as well as kind of a fixed tool, allows me to stay upright and hit my range of motion without falling forwards or backwards. So again, you can hit those points of performance. And now that we're loading a little bit, I would recommend keeping this heel on the ground at all times, not lifting up onto the toe for an added stretch. That's one variation. The second variation would be the low hold like this. And again, going down, hitting those same positions. By loading low, having your hands down low can maybe allow you to be a little bit more tall in your torso, which is a great thing to be practicing as you're developing your Cossack squat positions. So we've reviewed hand supported, we've reviewed foot elevated, we reviewed how to use the landmine and the stability of the landmine. Now you're ready to start getting into your Cossack squats in the open space. And one of the hacks that you can bring into this part of your training is actually using a counterbalance. So by holding a weight, you can actually make the exercise a touch easier, so long as you don't choose something that's too heavy for your abilities at this point. If I take this 16 kilogram kettlebell and I place it right in front of my chest as I start to perform my squat, what it's allowing me to do is stay really upright and lean my weight back and get this full ankle and hip flexion that's the bottom of the range of motion without falling backwards. So if you're still working on some of your flexibility, this is a great way to overcome that as you're learning the Cossack squat. So when you're practicing your skill work or your strength work, this would be an ideal loading position. If you want to start using a dumbbell or a kettlebell, you can hold it like this. You can turn it upside down, hold it close to your chest. I find this to be one of the best ways to get great range of motion. So combining strength and flexibility work in the Cossack squat. I hope those tips and I hope those regressions help you to better understand what you're supposed to be feeling and how you can get into some of those positions. I still get a lot of questions. Marcus, I'm not sure I'm doing this right. I'm not sure if I'm feeling this correctly. And it often comes down to some of the more common mistakes that we see in the Cossack squat. So right now, I want to break down what those common mistakes are, some quick fixes that you can bring into your training, help you get back on the right path, and ultimately just feel confident in what you're doing. Okay, a couple common mistakes that we see all the time at functional bodybuilding when people perform their Cossack squats. Number one, not prioritizing range of motion, okay? Your body and your mobility may only allow you to go down this far with your own body weight control. this is when to use the hand-supported options that we've shown you. Because what we need to be doing, and I can hand support with just a kettlebell down here, we need to be working on this full range of motion if we're ever going to progress to getting the maximum benefit out of an exercise like this, which is strength and mobility and core strength. Second thing that I see very commonly is that people try and stay very side to side in this frontal plane, which is great, but they have very tight adductors and they neglect this turnout of the toe. This turnout of the toe is essential to taking some of the stretch off of your adductors and allowing you to get into this deep position. So if you're struggling, you're here, oh, I feel stuck, let the toe turn up and you may be able to find yourself in a much deeper Cossack squat than you've ever been in before, which is again the road to success. Lastly, ankle, hip tightness, a lot of this happening. People falling backwards all the time in the Cossack squat when they try and hit range. Again, you're probably strong enough, and one of the things that we've found is that with unilateral exercises, some loading can go a long way to help you improve your mobility. So don't forget to use this counterbalance concept of holding a kettlebell in front of you to make sure that you're not falling backwards. Those are the three most common mistakes that we see. Hey, if you're having struggles with your Cossack squat, throw some questions in the description below. We would love to actually help you and get those comments answered for you. As with anything in functional bodybuilding, once you've achieved a certain movement complexity, there's always room to progress further. With the Cossack squat, take a look. You can do a back rack Cossack squat if you want to load heavy and do something that's going to really challenge your core strength and trunk strength and stability. Now, the back rack Cossack squat is not something you start with. You build up to it over time, but there's endless loading progressions with this movement, as you can see. Another way to take the Cossack squat to another level is to practice what we call the low switch Cossack squat. Now, once you've gotten the full range of motion movement down, you can start to maneuver side to side without coming up into a full standing position in the middle. What that's going to do is it's going to challenge your hip strength, flexibility. It's another way to really build a powerful stretch and mobility component to this exercise once you've figured out how to do this at its most elemental and fundamental level. Lastly, you can start to take the Cossack squat and you can turn it into a more dynamic exercise by performing a Cossack lunge. This is when you move your body laterally, the foot is moving and landing in position, folding you down into a squat and then standing all the way back to feet together. As you can see in this demo, I'm holding a kettlebell rack. This is another highly advanced version of the Cossack squat, but something that you can aspire to and look forward to progressing to later on. With functional bodybuilding, we always encourage you to pick the movement and the loading pattern and the complexity that is right for you. Hopefully today you've seen a number of different variations of the Cossack squat that allow you to think to yourself, wow, I think I could do that with confidence. Remember, if you choose to load, how you choose to load, what range of motion you decide to go through, whether you put your foot up on a box or you keep your foot on the floor, all of these variations are going to make it easier or harder for you to get into the ideal position. Leave your ego at the door, find what works for you, and then work it every week. Build strength, stability, and confidence. That is how you're going to progress and build strong bodies, resilient bodies that can do this for a long time to come. Hey Marcus, where's the best place to use the Cossack squat in my training? Well, there's a few different areas that you can actually use the Cossack squat. Perhaps the best place for many of you to start with is just to use it in your warm-ups as a mobility preparation tool. You're learning a skill, you don't want to be under fatigue, so use it at the beginning of your training when you're fresh and your body and your brain can really adapt. The next best place to use it is in some hypertrophy training or some strength training. Once you develop the foundation to do a good Cossack squat and you start to load it up, you can do this in a superset with an upper body or another lower body exercise to develop strength in the areas that we're working: quads, hamstrings, glutes, hip adductors. The final place that we like to use the Cossack squat in functional bodybuilding is within our mixed modal conditioning pieces. The Cossack squat is not something that you can rush through. You're not going to go super fast. So oftentimes we use it as a control point within conditioning workouts to make sure that your intensity doesn't get too high and that we can actually develop great single leg strength and quality muscle contractions in a workout when your breathing rate is elevated. The example that you're seeing here is of me running, performing Cossack squats and strict pull-ups. This is a really common way that we do something called functional pump conditioning. These are conditioning workouts that use weighted exercises, strict pull-ups or strict gymnastics exercises, as well as typical aerobic exercises like running or rowing or biking. The Cossack squat, again, is providing this control point where your heart rate is elevated, you're moving fast, and then you get to this movement that requires coordination, balance, stability. It's going to force you to slow down a little bit, which keeps our athletes' intensity in check. Who is the Cossack squat good for? Really everybody. General population, you're going to develop mobility and some single leg strength to avoid those imbalances and to keep you safe and healthy for a long time. If you're into hypertrophy or bodybuilding, it is an absolutely terrific exercise that's going to train the entire leg and the hip, and it's going to give you access to new ranges of motion so that when you go back to training your big squats, your big deadlifts, you're going to get more out of the actual muscle tissue. You're going to get a greater hypertrophy stimulus. And then, of course, for the sports, the athletes that are on the court, the athletes that are playing games where they have to move side to side, athleticism demands frontal plane. The Cossack squat is a great strength developer for the frontal plane. Cossack squat are a staple in the functional bodybuilding program, among many other movements that give you a full training from head to toe so that you can do more with your fitness. If you want to see how we use the Cossack squat in our training programs along with a ton of other unilateral training exercises, then try it out in Persist. If you click the link in the description below, you can go ahead and get 2 weeks of a free trial of my training program now. Thanks for joining me. If you have questions about this movement, I'd love to hear them down in the comments below. Until next time, have a great day wherever you are.